Hello and welcome. I'm محمد Khatibi, host of the program and a Middle East affairs expert. Today, we are taking a closer look at the evolving strategic relationship between Tehran and Beijing, a partnership that's becoming increasingly important in the face of renewed US sanctions and the UN snapback mechanism. To help us understand the opportunities and challenges shaping this relationship, I'm joined by Mr. Einar Tagen, Senior Fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation and the chairman of Asia Narratives for the 15th Five-Year Initiative. Sir, thank you for being here. It's great to have you on the program.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Let's start by the questions. To what extent do you think international sanctions influenced China's willingness in cooperating more with Iran?
Do you mean sanctions against China?
Against Iran, I mean.
China sees Iran as a country that is being pressed by the United States, not unlike Venezuela, Cuba, Russia, and many other countries. So there's a certain affinity toward that. China views things through a trade angle. They see all countries as having the right to self-determination, the right to have their own system, and it's not judgmental. The US side, obviously, as you know, believes in American exceptionalism and the idea that all countries have to either bow to or be part of an American network. So, yes, there's a certain affinity there, but it is not based on military support. It is based on trade. The idea that you want a peaceful world, that countries like Iran should be free to have their own path to development. They have the right. Every country has the right to be secure, and their security cannot depend on the insecurity of other countries. Every country has to be respected for what it is. Countries that have been created today are hodgepodges of peoples, languages, cultures, histories, and they cannot be separated. If we try to undo everything that history has created, we'll have a bigger mess than we have today. So the countries must be respected for what they are, not what you want to make them into. And finally, this fourth initiative is about global governance. There has to be a way in which people talk to each other rather than using troops and tanks. So to this extent that the US is continuing to isolate itself with this idea and notions that it can determine the world and that it can swim in the same river twice, by going back to some, quote, theoretical golden age of US unipolarity, doesn't work. It is something that is actually doing the exact opposite. It's isolating the US. Increasingly, countries, while they may bow to Donald Trump, they may flatter him and nominate him for Nobel Peace Prizes, but in the end, they don't like him. He's a bully. And what he's doing represents the antithesis of what America used to stand for, which was tolerance.
So, do you think that the sanctions against Iran will affect these countries' relationship? I mean, do you think that China will stop trading with Iran, and will it continue investment in Iran, or because of the US pressure, it will leave Iran alone?
No, China determines its own course, as has been seen by the pressures put on it by the United States, particularly Trump. He had to back down. China is not in a position where they're going to go back to the 100 years of colonial humiliation that they suffered many years ago. It is now a complete country. I outlined what they believe. It's not something they believe just for themselves. It's something they believe that is necessary for a multipolar world order. So the idea that China is going to somehow bow to U.S. pressures, when many of those pressures are being applied directly to China. Now, China has had a separate bank that it deals with Iran on, and this has been in place for many, many years. It doesn't deal with the SWIFT system, and it has been apart, so therefore it can continue. If the U.S. thinks that it can somehow pressure them, as they have with India and other places in terms of Russian oil, well, they're going to be sadly mistaken. China has more trump cards, excuse the pun, than Trump himself has, as we have seen with rare earths. But it's not just that. It's chemicals of every type. All the precursors for many of the medicines that are made in the world today come from China. China is an intermediate goods maker. 2 weeks ago, UNDP estimated that China, by 2030, will be 45% of the world's production, whereas the US will only be 11%.
Yes.
In those kind of realities, you have a situation where Donald Trump is jousting at windmills. He's literally Don Quixote living in the past, thinking that he's fighting giants when he's simply making a fool of himself.
Do you think, in regards to China's foreign policy in the Middle East, will it step up and challenge the US security umbrella? I mean, do you think that China is willing to confront the United States in the Middle East, in the Persian Gulf region, or it will continue not using military force, not stepping up in military terms, or will it eventually come to the conclusion that it should be more active in terms of military?
Well, I'm afraid from the Chinese point of view, it is not productive to get into a military situation. We've seen with the most recent world wars, both World War I and World War II, you can fight to defend yourself, but this idea that you start creating these alliances against other alliances, all you do is set up a tinderbox, which one spark can ignite and do it. The difference today is that we have nuclear weapons, and quite frankly, in the Middle East, with Israel having probably more than 200 to 400 nuclear weapons, it is a real danger. The irony here, of course, is that there's much talk about Iran's nuclear program, which has not been proven to be completely weaponized, whereas Israel has been outside the law, outside scrutiny, and continues to build more and more nuclear weapons, in fact, using that as leverage against all of the Middle East. I've heard it from people from Israel. So they said, if we are overwhelmed, we are only 5 million against 240 million. If we are overwhelmed, we will not hesitate to use what we have in order to, if we go, everyone goes. This is a scary idea. So this is not a situation where any country can go in and expect to, quote, solve the situation. The only solution at this point is if the US would stop providing the bombs, bullets, missiles, tanks that are killing innocent people in Palestine and Lebanon and 5 other countries where Israel has had unprovoked attacks.
So you are talking about Israel. Do you think that Chinese foreign policy and foreign policy interest allows it to support Iran in a renewed conflict with Israel? Will it choose sides, or will it still continue to be neutral against Israel and the whole conflict in the Middle East?
Okay, so you're setting up a false dilemma. I mean, it is not a situation where China has to choose. What it does is it continues to condemn what Israel is doing in these other countries. What Israel does in its own country lawfully, and I don't mean the West Bank where they're marauding around, displacing the Palestinians who've been living there for thousands of years. I'm talking about setting up a military confrontation won't work. So this idea that it's going to go to war with Israel as some sort of proxy against the United States is ridiculous. It wouldn't have the ability to project. It does not have 800 military camps located around the world. It has a military base in Djibouti, but that has only to do with piracy. And so this idea that somehow China will be drawn into a war, I think you'll see that it's resistant, but it will continue to condemn those actions which are against human nature. Remember, this is the 80th year of the celebration of victory against fascism. Unfortunately, we see it rising again. So they'll continue to call that out, but getting involved in a war with no end, with no end game.
What about
It's not smart or good.
What about supporting Iran? What about providing technologies, new technologies?
You seem, I know,
defenses?
I mean, you keep trying to push this idea that somehow China is going to get involved in the war on Iran's side, and that is wrong. I don't see that happening. Will they provide, things that can be used dual use? I think they already are, all right, quite frankly. So you've asked three questions now, all trying to say, well, what are the chances that China will join in with Iran? And I'm trying to tell you, my sense is that they won't. No, they will continue to trade with Iran. They will ignore U.S. sanctions. They will call out bad behavior, including the U.S., but they are not going to get involved in a war because there is no end game in a war.
What about continuing sanctions? How do you see in future, if the sanctions against Iran persist, will China continue to trade with Iran, have a good relationship with Iran, or will it stop? And let me ask another way.
I've already answered this. I've said China is not going to be bowing to the United States. I mean, Donald Trump
is the pressure becoming more on China to stop because of the Russia and other issues like the Taiwan issue?
No.
Look, I want to try
this idea that somehow China is going to trade. You want to say that, look, I mean, I often appear on television, all right, and I'm more interested in the questions than the answers I can give. All right. The questions you're asking clearly point to this idea that you would like to know whether or not China will join in with Iran in some sort of military capacity. And I'm telling you no, nor will they trade your security for their security. What did I tell you earlier? All right. One of the initiatives, security initiative, is you do not create a world where your security depends on the insecurity of another country. Right? And that would be the case. Taiwan belongs to China. That is not something that's going to be negotiated, nor can the US say, we'll trade you. How can you trade somebody for something they already have? So this notion that somehow China is going to be backed down, I think quite clearly you can see with the trade negotiations, China is not going to be pushed around because they have too much economic power right now. So are they interested in a war? No, but they're not going to be pushed around by a bully who will be there for the next 3 years.
Thank you, Mr. Tangen, so much for sharing your valuable insights. And it was a fascinating discussion. And with your insights, we have more clear insights about the Chinese foreign policy. And thanks to the audience who are tuning in, and I'm محمد Khatibi, and see you next time.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. All the best.
See
Take
you
care.
again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes, you bet. Bye.